All right, just called the Pike County Murders, a true crime
On a
documentary.
spring day in 2016, in a quiet rural area of southern Ohio, one family awoke to a shocking tragedy and found themselves potentially under attack. 8 members of the Roden family across 4 different homes had been found murdered. The killings appeared cold and calculated, and the victims weren't random. The family had been targeted. Concerned for the safety of the community and
Oh,
with few
wow.
clues immediately apparent, the local sheriff's department and state investigators launched what would become arguably the most complex investigation in the state's history. Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and this is Just Thought Lounge. JTL is the true crime channel that delivers serious, well-balanced coverage of the cases that really make you think. We're about to take a look at another extensive high-profile case. This investigation takes us through the tragic scenes of multiple murders, curiously little physical evidence, questionable investigators, confessions and competing stories, and ends where it started, with a single family. Let's take a look. Piketon is a small village in Pike County, Ohio. It is roughly an hour's drive south from Columbus. The area sits in the southern Appalachian region of the state, characterized by the western foothills of the Appalachian Mountains and the Appalachian Plateau. On the morning of Friday, April 22nd, Bobby Jo Manley drove out to the home of her sister's ex-husband, Chris Roden, known as Chris Sr. The family remained close. Bobby Jo was at the property that morning to feed the animals, Chris's dogs, chickens, and pigs. She also had an arrangement to do a bit of cleaning for him. With Bobby that morning was a friend, Billy Morgan. What struck Bobby Jo and Billy first as they came up the drive were that dogs that belonged inside had been left out, and Chris's truck remained in the driveway. Something wasn't right. When they entered, Billy and Bobby Jo found a recliner in the living room had been moved. They noticed vice grips on the floor and a smear of blood among bunched up rugs leading from the front room, through the kitchen, into Chris's bedroom. Following the trail, they found Chris Sr. alongside his cousin Gary, covered partially with a comforter, both dead on the floor.
I think my brother-in-law's dead.
Okay, what's the address?
Give me just a second.
Ma'am, you gotta tell me what's going on.
There's blood all over the house.
Okay.
My brother-in-law's in the bedroom. It looks like someone has beat the hell out of him. Roden, and Gary Roden.
Chris and Gary Roden?
Both of them in there looks like they're dead.
You think they're both dead?
I think they're both dead. Looks like someone has beat the out of them.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the house?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
The door was locked when we got here, but I know where the key was at. And I went in, and they're laying on the floor.
Okay, wait.
I'm done out.
Okay.
I'm standing outside right now.
Okay, just stay out of the house. Don't let anybody go in there, okay?
Yeah.
All right, we got deputies on the way, okay?
Thank you.
After discovering Chris and Gary Roden inside Chris's home, Bobby Jo rushed to the nearby home of Chris's son, Frankie Roden, and his fiancée, Hannah Gilly, to notify them. Frankie and Hannah had just welcomed a baby boy 6 months earlier, and they also cared for Frankie's 3-year-old son. Once inside their home, Bobby Jo found Frankie and Hannah. They were lying side by side in bed.
What the hell? It's weird, man.
And had clearly also been victims of a brutal attack. The children were unharmed. As emergency responders gathered on the property, Bobby Jo contacted her brother James and delivered the shocking and heartbreaking news. Unable to reach their sister Dana Roden, James jumped in his truck and drove to Dana's home. He needed to tell her what had happened to Chris Sr. and their son Frankie. The couple also shared daughter Hannah Mae and son Chris Jr., though they lived with Dana in her new home, having only moved in days before. Hannah Mae was mother to 2-year-old Sophie and had given birth only 4 days earlier to another daughter. When James got to his sister's home, the front door swung open when he knocked. He walked into the home, calling Dana's name, but there was no response. He went straight back to her bedroom, past Hannah Mae and Chris Jr.'s room to find Dana. It was dark in her room. He couldn't see whether his sister was in bed sleeping or not. When James approached, he attempted to move the pillow slightly from beneath his sister's head, but then he paused. James was fairly certain of what he would discover. Instead, he went home to get his wife, and then the two returned to the property so he could check on Hannah's baby. When they got back to the house, however, James could not bring himself to go back inside. He flagged down the police as they drove to the first two crime scenes. These officers entered the home to find Dana Roden, Hannah Mae, and Chris Jr. Each had been shot at close range, just as the other members of their family. Hannah's baby was unharmed. Sophie was not at the house. She had been staying with her father. As emergency response teams and local law enforcement under the leadership of Pike County Sheriff Charles Reeder descended upon the three homes on Union Hill Road that morning, family of the victims began to gather at a nearby church. The news was spreading, and the Roden family was both grief-stricken and fearful. Who was targeting their family?
I don't know.
One such family member, Donald Stone, heard secondhand about the tragedy and joined others at the church. Unable to reach either his cousin, Kenneth Roden, nor Kenneth's son, Luke, Donald grew concerned. It was nearly 1:30 in the afternoon when Donald arrived at Kenneth's home on Left Fork Road, a property just south of the crime scene on Union Hill.
911, can I help you?
Yeah, I need a deputy to come out to close to 799 Left Fork.
Okay.
It's all this stuff that's on the news. I just found my cousin with a gunshot wound.
Okay. Sir, is he alive?
No.
Attorney General Mike DeWine called in the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, the BCI, to assist the many sheriff's departments that had culminated to assist Sheriff Reeder and Pike County deputies.
This is a horrible tragedy that has occurred here in Pike County. Each one of the victims appears to have been executed. Each one of the victims appears to be shot in the head.
Victims across the four crime scenes. At scene 1, the home of Christopher Roden Sr., bullet holes in the front door frame and blood smear from the living room into the bedroom suggested that the shooting had occurred near the doorway, or perhaps Chris had been standing on his front porch.
Oh, no.
He was then moved after the fact towards the back of the house where Bobby Joe would find him. Christopher Sr., 40 years old, and Gary Roden, 38, showed no signs of defensive wounds, nor was there any evidence that either had attempted to flee the attack. Cameras had been located on Chris Sr.'s property, including a motion detector mounted on the garage. Wires connecting the camera system housed in the garage were found disconnected. There was also blood on the doorway leading into the garage. DNA testing would later reveal that this was Gary's, leading BCI investigators to deduce that the killer or killers had entered the garage to disable the surveillance and remove any recordings after committing the murders. Additionally, shell cartridges from the fired guns were conspicuously missing at the scene. A projectile was located beneath the trailer where Chris Sr. and Gary were killed. At the home of Frankie Roden and Hannah Hazel Gilley, there were signs of an attempted forced entry. The side panel on the front door had clearly been damaged. However, it appeared that the lock had not been broken to enter. A back window was left open, but the multiple items that sat undisturbed around and beneath it led investigators to conclude that it was unlikely that the shooter entered the home in this way. It appeared Frankie and Hazel had been sleeping when the shooter entered. In or near the bed, BCI found 5 different cartridge casings from a rimstrike bullet stamped on the end with the letters REM, indicating they were Remington brand bullets. Across the room near the bedroom door, they found another rimfire cartridge on the ground, this one still a live, unfired round. It bore markings of a different brand. It was already becoming clear that more than one weapon was involved, and very likely, multiple shooters. At Dana Roden's house, crime scene 3, there were multiple pieces of potential physical evidence collected in and around the property. A cigarette butt was DNA tested and returned only Hannah Mae's. A $5 bill was discovered sitting under a plastic bucket, but testing returned nothing of value. The investigation was leaving no stone or bucket unturned, but there was very little concrete evidence emerging. Across the multiple gunshot wounds suffered by Hannah Mae, Dana, and Chris Jr., it was unusual that there was not much ballistic evidence to collect inside the home. An empty shell casing was found in Hannah Mae's bedroom beneath her baby's crib. It was for a .22 caliber bullet, like the ones that were found in the bodies of Hannah Hazel and Frankie Roden, but not at all similar to the bullets that killed Gary and Chris Sr. At the fourth and final crime scene, Kenneth Roden's murder matched the same pattern. There was no sign of forced entry at either Dana or Kenneth's home. All of the shell casings recovered from the 4 different crime scenes were fired from the same 3 guns. A work friend of Kenneth's, with whom he often carpooled, informed authorities of surveillance on the property. But as he walked them around the property, they found many of the cameras were missing. Similarly, a neighbor of the Rodens near Union Hill returned from vacation out of state to find the cameras that he had fixed on the roads near to the crime scenes were gone. Ballistic and DNA evidence failed to paint a clear picture. BCI agents on the scene would, however, uncover key physical evidence in the form of several shoe prints, located in multiple crime scenes. First at Chris Sr.'s home, where 2 shoe impressions were found in the kitchen. They shopped around and found the print pattern at a Walmart on a pair of cheap shoes with Velcro fasteners. They scoured hours of surveillance footage from every Walmart within a 50-mile radius. And what they discovered was that Dana Roden's father had purchased a pair of these shoes in size 10 a few months prior to the murders. This revelation would lead to a dead end, however, when the shoes were located, already worn through and tossed in a bin. They had irregular tread patterns from heavy use. The shoes worn at the crime scene had unworn treads. They were brand new. Sheriff Reeder reported that 38 deputies were actively searching the woodlands to the back of the Roden property. He also cautioned members of the family to stay alert and on guard. He believed they had been, and perhaps still could be, intentionally targeted. It became clear that the perpetrators knew the victims and their homes very well, either due to personal connections or extensive covert planning for the attack, perhaps both.
This was a pre-planned execution of 8 individuals. It was a sophisticated operation. And those who carried it out were trying to do everything that they could do to hinder the investigation and their prosecution.
Located in Chris Sr.'s home was a large safe. Inside were dozens of firearms, drugs, and various ammunition. In the surrounding outbuildings on the property, deputies also uncovered what was described as a large-scale marijuana growing operation that DeWine called sophisticated. The discovery led investigators to wonder whether the execution-style killings were drug-motivated or connected to rival drug cartels in the area.
Let me go ahead, and I think it's okay for us to confirm that we did find marijuana in three locations.
Near the crime scenes or at the crime scene?
At the crime scene.
Like bags of marijuana?
Grow operation?
It's a grow operation.
The theory of drug-related cartel hits dominated the public understanding of the investigation for several months. There was also speculation that 1 or 2 potentially stolen vehicles found on the Roden property could be connected. It was not until the autumn of 2016 that the sheriff and AG DeWine began to indicate publicly that a personal motive, not a drug-related one, was likely behind the massacre.
At this point, do you believe that the Mexican drug cartel is involved?
Absolutely not.
Can you explain why you say that?
How would they think that?
With the nature of the investigation and
like
the things that's
thing
been
to say.
revealed while conducting the investigation, there would be no indication to me as to any type of Mexican drug cartel being involved.
You're saying that the suspects likely either live in Pike County or in the area somewhere nearby?
Yes, that is my belief.
100% certainty.
That's my belief.
The focus of suspicions at that point was on a family very close to the Rodens, a local family who had chosen to sell their large property on Peterson Road shortly after the murders and move to Alaska. These were the Wagners, Billy, wife Angela, and their 2 sons, Jake and George. The central connection between the Rodens and the Wagners was 2-year-old Sophie, who was the daughter of Jake Wagner and Hannah Mae Roden. After Hannah's shocking murder, Jake had received full custody of Sophie and taken her with him out of state, ostensibly to shelter the child as she grew older from the brutality of what had happened to her mother back in Ohio. In August of 2010, at the age of 17, Jake Wagner met 13-year-old Hannah Mae Roden. At the time, Hannah was a chatty child who reportedly annoyed Jake by talking endlessly to him about her pet rabbit. But apparently, Jake was not annoyed for very long. Jake requested permission of Chris Sr. to begin dating young Hannah that same year, a request that was agreed to with the stipulation that a chaperone was always present. 2 years later, at the age of 15, Hannah was pregnant with their daughter. The couple had already agreed on the name Sophie. Disputes over their daughter and who she would live with began even before Hannah gave birth. Correspondence indicates that Jake insisted his daughter stay with him at all times. Hannah could also live with him if she wanted.
It's weird.
At first, they did live together at the Wagner house. This arrangement was short-lived, however. Hannah left Jake in early 2015, arranging to have Sophie on alternate weeks and constantly arguing with both him and his mother.
Man, those people, not more like the country, man. Oh man, not all of them, but there's a lot of them that are kind of like these families that they're talking about. It's weird up there, man. That's all I gotta say. It's just weird.
Angela over their arrangements. Angela and the Wagners demanded that Hannah Mae sign over full custody of her daughter. She refused. "They will have to kill me first," she wrote. The Peterson Road property was searched extensively by the BCI over several days. Next, they searched the Flying W farm in Pike County, which Frederica Wagner, Billy Wagner's mother, owned. No search warrant was required for the Peterson home, which had been sold prior to the move to Alaska. The new owner of the property gave law enforcement full access, much to the frustration of the Wagners. Spent shell casings, hundreds of them from various weapons, were located across the large property. These were taken in for testing. Based on the casings found on the Wagner property, a firearms expert and forensic scientist for the BCI assessed that a weapon that had been fired repeatedly at the Wagner home was the same gun used at 2 of the 4 crime scenes where the Rodens were killed. With physical evidence linking the Wagners to the crime scenes and a heated dispute over the custody of a child providing a personal motive, the BCI focused in on the Wagners. Wiretaps were placed on the family's cell phones and recording devices were placed inside their vehicles. These devices delivered various levels of successful recordings. Those within the vehicles were practically inaudible due to road and engine noises. Some phone conversations were arguably incriminating, but still failed to provide the smoking gun that investigators had hoped for. Agents also adopted false identities on social media and tried to entice the Wagners into talking about the case. If the Wagners had meticulously planned and committed the murders, they were not talking about it, even amongst each other. The most damning evidence would come out when they interviewed the Wagners directly. Angela Wagner was interviewed by special agents with the BCI at the Montana-Canada border where she was traveling with her grandchildren.
We want to talk to you maybe just a fresh perspective on things, okay?
Yeah.
Each member of the Wagner family held to the same script when initially questioned. The relationship between them and the Rodens was fine. Hannah Mae was like a daughter, a sister, and the custody arrangement with Sophie was working.
I want to get into your relationship with the Roden family. Could you discuss that? Again, I'm coming into this. Act like you've had to, and I know this is dragging up a bunch of stuff, but just act like, because I don't know.
You don't know anything. Okay. Here's the thing. The relationship I had with the Rodens was through Hannah. Hannah and my son Jake were together for 5 years.
Angela framed her relationship with Hannah and the extended family as a good one. She spoke fondly of Hannah and Sophie's other Nana, Dana Roden. But computers seized from the Wagner family showed that Angela was routinely accessing Hannah's personal accounts and reading her messages in the months leading to the murders. Angela appeared to be monitoring conversations about the custody dispute, whether Hannah would sign papers or was seeking a lawyer.
Having
the reason why you would think that somebody would come forward and indicate that you or someone in your family was some way involved in hurting the rodents?
I have no idea why anybody would say that.
In the searches of the Wagner properties, police had seized custody papers giving sole custody of Sophie to Jake Wagner in the case that anything were to happen to her mother, Hannah Mae. Ostensibly, these were signed by both Hannah and Angela's mother, Rita Newcomb, who was a notary public. The papers were dated the 31st of December 2014, when Sophie was only a year old and her parents were still together. But the true date of when these supposed legal documents were drafted was given away by the date left on them by the printer.
Does this look familiar to you?
Those are, well, they must have done them. I don't know when they were done. Yeah, I don't remember those.
You don't remember that?
No.
This is what we're curious about though, and then it was, do you know who that is?
Yeah, that's my mom.
That's your mom? So your mom notarized this,
Right.
but you didn't know about it?
I don't remember it.
Okay.
I mean, if it was, I don't
Now
know.
this was in your things, okay? And this is the date it was printed out. You remember printing it out?
Was it in with these?
You know, I wasn't there.
Oh, well, we don't know. You're just
I
getting
wasn't
the
there.
papers. I don't know.
But this is the date it was printed out off the computer.
I don't know. You know what? I might have printed it. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't remember on that.
And that would have been roughly 3 weeks before
This was 3 weeks
they were killed.
before.
The BCI had good reason to suspect that the custody documents had been forged by Angela, perhaps with the help of her mother. They also believed that Angela was directly involved in planning the murder that would render these arrangements necessary. Angela was presented with the image of the shoe impressions taken from the crime scenes. Then she was presented with the receipt for 2 pairs of matching shoes from Walmart found in her home, and an image of her at the store after purchasing them.
You don't ever remember buying those for any reason?
Look at this dude in Florida. Look at this dude in Florida, bro. He just chilling, man. He's just chilling. Alright, sorry, back to the video.
I remember seeing those. Does it look familiar to you in any way?
I know.
No?
I mean, I've seen Billy's dad have some of those.
Oh, no.
Okay. We have a receipt for those shoes purchased by you.
Put a hoodie on.
Okay, well, I did purchase them.
Okay. Those were purchased
7th of April.
7th of April, which is, you know, maybe a little right around 2 weeks before the murders. Do you know who those shoes were for, Angela? You bought 2 pairs of them.
Somebody wearing those shoes stepped in the blood of either Chris or Gary or whomever and left the shoe impression, the tread impression. We matched it with our lab database. So we know it came from those particular shoes that you bought less than 2.5 weeks prior to the murders.
I do not think that they could be those.
They are. Our lab matched them.
They're an identical match.
Identical size to what the shoe tread was at the crime scene to the size shoe that you bought at Walmart.
We're just trying to figure it out.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I got them, but I don't. They are an old man's shoe, so they wouldn't wear them. But they wouldn't have used them on those because I threw them away.
But what away?
So you remember buying them?
Yeah, I mean, I do, but because I remember they wanted some shoes,
You threw them away?
but they're, you know, an old man's shoe, and they wouldn't wear them, but I don't know how they could be the exact ones.
Why would you buy them if you don't think they would wear them?
No, I said they wouldn't afterwards.
Okay.
After what?
They saw them.
After they saw them?
You know, old man's
So
shoes.
you did look at them and say,
The investigation into the Pike County massacre tracked down more than 1,100 tips from the public, conducted 550 interviews, tested more than 700 pieces of evidence, and served more than 200 search warrants, subpoenas, and court orders. It was considered the largest and most complex investigation in Ohio history. The final clue came when law enforcement were able to confirm the existence of a homemade silencer they say was built by the suspects, the Wagner family. The silencer was produced using metal washers and a Maglite brand flashlight. It was found during a search of the Wagner farm after agents used a dive team to check a well inside a barn. It appeared that someone had attempted to destroy the silencer in a fire before throwing it into the well. The evidence compiled against the Wagners implicated the whole family. There were purchases made for items used in the crime by multiple family members. There had been multiple shooters and multiple weapons traced back to the Wagners. On November 13, 2018, 6 members of the Wagner family were arrested. This included the patriarch Billy Wagner, his wife Angela, their sons Jake and George, but also the 2 grandmothers, Frederica Wagner and Rita Newcomb.
We believe that the Wagners conspired together to develop an elaborate plan to kill the 8 victims under the cover of darkness and then carefully cover up their tracks. We believe the evidence will show that the suspects spent months planning the crimes. They studied the victims' habits and their routines. They knew the layouts of their homes. They knew where they slept.
Angela's mother, Rita, was charged in connection with the massacre for lying to investigators and a grand jury. The grandmother claimed that she had witnessed Hannah Roden sign the custody documents, giving sole custody of Sophie to Jake. On December 2, 2019, however, when facing obstruction of justice and other related charges in connection to the forged documents, Rita testified she did not actually see Hannah sign the paperwork, and that her daughter, Angela, stole the notary stamp, used it, and then asked her mother to lie.
I feel that it's not a good Christian thing to lie, and I couldn't live with it anymore.
Billy's mother, Frederica Wagner, was also thought to be complicit in the murder plot. Frederica denied any involvement in the crime and pleaded not guilty to the obstruction and perjury charges she faced.
Why are these families?
The state asserted that she lied to investigators and the grand jury after 2 bulletproof vests were found in her home. Authorities said they believed the vests were worn by the killers as they crept into the Roden homes while the family slept. Frederica said she had bought them through Amazon after the killings happened to protect her family. Investigators couldn't find a record of her purchase and filed charges against her. She later admitted she'd bought them on eBay and provided receipts verifying they were bought after the Roden family was already dead. "I made a mistake," she said at the time. "I'm nearly 77 years old."
Kind of a little disappointed in the system because nowadays I think it used to be I always believed you were innocent till proven guilty. Nowadays it seems like general opinion is you're guilty until you're proven innocent. Perhaps that's because of social media, I don't know. But I never lied about anything.
There would be further issues taken with law enforcement before any of the Wagners reached trial. Throughout the investigation, allegations flew regarding Sheriff Reeder and several other Pike County deputies and potential corruption within the sheriff's office. In March 2021, the sheriff was sentenced to 3 years in prison after he pleaded guilty to theft in office and tampering with evidence. According to prosecutors and his own plea, the sheriff used his office to steal thousands of dollars that had been confiscated as evidence in other cases. There was no evidence directly linking any corruption or evidence tampering in the Roden murder case, only speculation that the sheriff's department behavior could raise questions over the competency of their investigation.
Why did you take the money?
I took the money and mind you, this does not excuse it, but from drug dealers that took it from parents of very poor people in this county.
The damage that you have caused to the citizens of Pike County, to law enforcement who every day get up, face the same sort of stresses that you do. They go home at night, they get up in the morning, their family, they don't know if they're going to come home. The sacrifices that these men and women make, I think you made a mockery of.
On the 5th anniversary of the massacre, apparently motivated by his grandmother's plea for honesty, Jake Wagner made a surprise move. He entered a guilty plea on 23 counts pending against him, including 8 aggravated murder charges. He agreed to share the full story of the killings and, if necessary, testify against his parents and brother. In exchange, he would not face the death penalty.
Because of the fact that the sentencing agreement, the plea agreement, includes consecutive sentences of life in prison without parole, it's not anticipated that you will ever be released from prison. You understand that, correct? I do, Your Honor.
As Jake began talking, the details of an elaborate, precisely planned murder plot took shape. Jake explained how he and his brother George acquired a 2010 black GMC pickup truck to avoid using any of their own vehicles for the murders. The brothers modified the truck to build a false bed so they could be hidden when they first arrived at the crime scene. Jake said he threw bales of hay or straw on top of the false bed to conceal its presence. His father Billy made arrangements to meet with Chris Sr. that night, but when he arrived, Jake and George, hidden in the truck bed, rolled out into concealed positions under the truck and readied to take their first shots.
Yeah,
Chris Sr. was then lured to the front porch by Billy Wagner. Billy asked Chris to call his cell phone. He had misplaced it. That call went through to his phone back at his house, where all 3 men had left their devices in case they were tracked later. They disabled cameras at multiple properties, collected shell casings, and stole the victims' cell phones when they were able to locate them. The brothers wore new Walmart sneakers on their feet, dark clothing, and face masks. Jake admitted to killing 5 of the 8 victims and shooting at Chris Sr., whom his father also shot. Gary Roden was killed by Billy, Jake said. Afterwards, Jake entered the garage to disable the cameras. After walking over to the next trailer on foot, Jake broke into Frankie and Hannah Gillies' home through the window when his knife failed to pry open their front door. He confessed to murdering the couple once inside. At the 3rd crime scene, all 3 men entered the home of Dana Roden. The door had been unlocked. There, Jake was responsible for killing Dana, Chris Jr., and Hannah Mae. They drove Chris Sr.'s truck the 5+ miles to Kenneth's home in case they were spotted on the road or by Kenneth as they pulled into the drive. Billy had entered Kenneth's home alone. The brothers saw a flash, and his father returned. The next day, Billy delivered the black pickup truck to a family member as a gift, who promptly registered it in her name, thereby bypassing any record of the Wagner men ever having possession or ownership of the vehicle.
Did he clean out the truck?
Together, the brothers dug a large hole on their property to temporarily conceal the murder weapons, including Jake's Colt 22 and the SKS rifle that George had carried that night. They would later move many of these to other locations and also burn clothing and other evidence. Jake's information aligned with evidence already recovered from the farm, a burn pit where they recovered and collected burned electronic devices. Jake led investigators to cement-filled buckets where the men had hidden the weapons. The buckets were then put into the water as anchors for a goose house the brothers gave their grandfather as a birthday present. From the cement, they retrieved weapons, ammunition, and Jake's hunting knife. Much of what Jake outlined aligned exactly with the elements of the crime that had already been deduced, but also much was new. Investigators had not known about the truck. They had also searched the Wagner family property for days and admitted it was unlikely they would ever have found the cement-filled buckets. Also, critically, they did not know who was present at the crime scenes and who had pulled the trigger. On this point, they had only Jake Wagner's word. Faced with her son's confession, Angela Wagner also took a plea deal, admitting guilt for her part in the planning, but not the execution of the murders.
Wagner pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, aggravated burglary, obstruction of justice, and almost a dozen other charges.
Ms. Wagner, does that sound like the agreement that you reached with the state of Ohio?
Yes, Your Honor.
In Angela's deal, she agreed to serve 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Both Billy and George entered pleas of not guilty.
Wagner pled not guilty to all the charges against him, knowing a conviction could result in the death penalty.
George Wagner faced 8 counts of aggravated murder and went to trial in September 2022. The state argued that George was complicit in the murders, from the planning stages through to the attempted cover-up of the evidence. He was as guilty as Jake, whether he had pulled the trigger or not. George took the stand in his own defense. He told the jury that he was not even present when the murders took place in the early morning hours of April 22nd. He had gone to bed around 10 p.m.
Did you ever leave to go up and commit these murders?
No.
Did you know that Jake and your dad had left?
No.
How do you explain that?
I just didn't know they left.
Did you go to bed that night? Did you go to sleep that night?
Yes.
About what time did you go to sleep?
10-ish.
I'm sorry?
10-ish, sometime around there. I can't, it's been a long time, so usually around 10-ish.
That's your normal bedtime?
Usually, when I'm home.
There was no DNA evidence linking George to the scenes. Although some cameras captured 2 vehicles on the road that night, it showed only lights and murky shapes, and identification was impossible from these images. The shoe prints became integral to placing George at the scene. 2 left footprints found at crime scene 1 and 1 found in the living room of Dana's home potentially placed George inside. Jake placed George inside of Dana's home in that exact position facing Chris Jr.'s bedroom, while he was entering Dana, then Hannah Mae's room. If the physical evidence could not directly or wholly corroborate Jake's version of events, in the eyes of the law, it did not matter. If George had assisted in the planning, he was complicit. In testimony that was not recorded for the public, both Angela and Jake told the court about how the murders had been planned and executed. According to Jake, it was he and Billy that had formulated the plan to murder Hannah Mae and her family. It was Billy that had given instructions to Angela to make certain purchases, and Billy that had mapped out how the crime would play out. At the heart of the Wagners' demands to take Sophie from Hannah was the belief, likely entirely imagined and exaggerated by Angela, that Sophie had been, or was going to be, abused by a member of the Roden family.
They did not think that she had done anything wrong to Sophia, but they felt that when she was with her, that Hannah was bringing her up against people that she shouldn't. And again, the reality of those fears is questioned, but that was their perception. So that is why she died that night, is because she refused to be manipulated by the Wagners, because she refused to sign the paperwork giving custody to them.
Jake had suggested that perhaps they could murder Hannah and her new boyfriend and then stage the scene to appear as a murder-suicide. This plan was rejected by the other family members. When they did agree on a plan, it was based on the premise that if Hannah was killed, her relatives would know who was responsible and come after Jake and or the rest of the family. So they posited that Hannah's father, Chris Sr., her uncle Kenneth, and her older brother needed to be added to the hit list. Hannah's other family members were simply there at the wrong time. They were potential witnesses and so also lost their lives.
Were you aware at any time that Jake and your dad and your mom were planning to kill the Rodens?
No.
Was that ever discussed with you?
No.
Did you have any idea that was going to happen?
No.
Did you know of any reason that your family wanted to kill the Rodens?
No.
The jury saw dozens of bank statements which painted a picture that the Wagner family intermingled finances to the point where Angela would use her son's credit and bank cards to buy items to carry out the murders. Even if her sons did not know exactly what she was doing, they had given her free reign of the cards. Prosecutors presented evidence that Angela Wagner bought a cell phone jammer and bug detector, which was used in the killings, using George's credit card. The item was quite expensive, almost $600 and ordered from China. So when the purchase was made, the fraud department of the credit card company called George to ensure that he had authorized the purchase online. And he had. The trial saw 2.5 months of testimony. Jurors heard about the extensive criminal history of the Wagner family, including theft, multiple instances in which their homes were burnt down for insurance claims, Billy's drug issues, and other sordid behavior. The state painted the picture of a family that was insular, selfish, morally corrupt, and criminal. As the defense argued that it was not George's fault that he had been born a Wagner, jurors also heard from his ex-wife, Tabitha, whose experience with the Wagner family mirrored Hannah Mae's in many ways. Tabitha escaped her unhappy marriage to George and the Wagner home by literally running from the house while Angela searched for her shotgun. But Tabitha did not have the family support system that Hannah had, and the Wagners had successfully convinced her to sign over custody of her son with George, named Bullvine, to them. Before Hannah had been killed, Tabitha told the young mother never to make the mistake that she did.
Now, George, of course, saying he didn't go along at all. But is there reasonable doubt here about whether he went? And if he went, what were his intentions? I mean, they only bought 2 pairs of shoes. You can't change that fact. You can't change the fact that it was Billy and Jake that talked about killing these people. Even Angela said that. They got nothing on George. Other than the word of his lying, to watch my language, brother. And his mother, who dragged her own mother into this case. Talk about a piece of work. Angela dragged her own mother into this case.
While it's not enough just to be present at a scene of a murder, there are certain things that you can't do if you know someone's going to commit a murder. All right? Number one, you cannot allow your credit card to be used to purchase items that are going to be used in the murder. Number two, if an item that is going to be used in the murder is purchased with your credit card and it sets off your fraud detection, you cannot authorize that purchase. You cannot go along with somebody when you know that they're purchasing a vehicle that's going to be used in the murder. You cannot go along with them for the purpose of purchasing that vehicle and jumping title on that vehicle so you guys don't ever even show up in the chain. 6, you cannot hold one board. You cannot put in one screw. You cannot put in one nail into a false bed that you know is going into the back of a truck for the purpose of committing a murder. To be put in that truck, to be taken to a murder scene, and to be ultimately used in that murder. You cannot slide out of the back of that truck and take up a firing position for any reason, whether it's to kill somebody or whether it's to pull security and protect somebody so that they can kill somebody. You can't do that at all, or you're on the hook for murder.
It took the jury 8 hours to convict George Wagner of the 22 counts against him, including 8 charges of aggravated murder.
It says, we, the jury, find beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, George Washington Wagner IV, is guilty of aggravated murder as charged in count 1 of the indictment.
His sentencing hearing is scheduled for December 19th, 2022. George was saved from facing a potential death sentence due to the deals that his brother and mother took to testify against him. His son was given back to the custody of his mother, who had long fought to have him return to her. Billy Wagner is the last remaining family member to face charges. As of the production of this video, his case is expected to go to trial next year in 2023. That was the story of the tragic, complicated, and still ongoing case of the Pike County Massacre. Thanks for watching. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
Alright. If you enjoyed that reaction video, please like. I've been liking doing these. Yeah. Like and subscribe to the Jaky Live channel for more reactions.